Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, guys. Today's topic is about synapse, right? We've all studied about the motor neuron, sensory neuron, relay neuron, and we all know that your nervous system cannot function without these different kinds of neurons communicating with each other through a mechanism. Now, the reality is that the way we perform our voluntary and involuntary movements is a result of an interaction or a communication between different kinds of neurons. But let's say if this is neuron A and this is neuron B, right? Neuron A and this is neuron B. In reality, they don't physically touch each other. They don't touch each other. So there has to be a mechanism which allows the communication of nerve impulses from neuron A to neuron B without physically touching each other. And for that, we need to know what a synapse is. So basically, a synapse is a link between one neuron and another neuron. Okay, there is no physical contact between one neuron and the next. Instead, in between these two neurons is a very tiny gap. Okay, there is a tiny gap, and this gap is known as the synaptic cleft. Okay, so the place between two neurons, the space between two neurons is a tiny gap, and that gap is known as a synaptic cleft, right? Synapses, where they are found, कहाँ होते हैं ये? They are usually found between the fine branches at the end of the axon of one neuron and the dendrites or the cell body of another neuron, right? I repeat, the synapses or the junction or the link between one neuron and another neuron, where do we find it? We will find it between the fine branches at the end of the axon of one neuron. For example, if this is one neuron, right? This is one neuron, the cell body, and this is its axon. This is the ending of the axon. So the synapse will be found at the ending of the axon of one neuron or and the dendrites or the cell body of another neuron. यानी कि अब ये दूसरा neuron जो यहाँ पे शुरू होगा, so it will be the dendrites or the cell body of another neuron. Neuron A, neuron B. So this place is your synapse, right? The number of synapses in our body, in our nervous system, is very large. And why it should be large is so that it provides a large surface area for the transfer of information. For example, just to give you an example, about 1,000 synapses may be found on the dendrites and the cell body of a single motor neuron in the spinal cord. For example, if this, let's say this is your body, right? And somewhere here you have your spinal cord, okay? And spinal cord में many spinal nerves are arising, और वो सारी motor nerves है, right? So there are about 1,000 synapses may be found on the dendrites and the cell body of a single motor neuron. यानी अगर एक motor neuron यहाँ से आ रहा है, तो इस motor neuron पर जो है, there will be 1,000 synapses. Some cells in the brain may receive up to 10,000 synapses. Why do we have so many synapses? Because we have to understand that the way our brain functions is not very straightforward. If we just take into account how our brain has to function when a human being comes across a dangerous situation, let's say fright, flight, and fight, adrenaline is released. Okay, now that adrenaline will be responsible for the dilation of your pupils, for the contraction of your muscles, for increasing your heart rate, for increasing your breathing rate. So in order to bring about all these multiple actions, it is a must that you have lots of synapses, not only in your brain, but everywhere else in your spinal nerves, in your motor neurons, and in your sensory neurons. So an integrated activity of these neurons can be possible. So that's why the role of synapses is very crucial for the normal functioning of your nervous system. Then this is a general description of a synapse. We will be doing a very special kind of a synapse. If हम synapse की, if we take into account the classical definition, that would be the junction between two neurons. But there is a special kind of a synapse which is known as a neuromuscular junction, in which we have a, connection between a nerve. For example, if this is your nerve and then this is your muscle, right? So this is a special kind of a synapse in which the nerve has to communicate with the muscle so that it allows the muscle to contract. Especially this is in case of skeletal muscles. So this special kind of a synapse is known as a neuromuscular junction. It's special. It's not a classical synapse. Classical synapses are junctions between two neurons. Now we'll go into, this was the the basic outline of a synapse. Now we'll go into the detailed anatomy of a synapse. Okay, and for that you can see this diagram in front of you. Every synapse will consist of two neurons communicating with each other, right? For example, this is your neuron 1 and this is your neuron 2. And this is the communicating junction which has been labeled as a synapse. Now, a synapse will consist of a swelling at the end of a nerve fiber. Swelling at the end of a nerve fiber, and this is that swelling. Let me just outline the swelling for you. Let's say if this is your nerve fiber को हम axon भी कह सकते हैं, it's the same thing. Now suddenly you see that this axon has swollen up, right? ये पूरा जो है वो आपका ending of the axon है. This is the swollen up portion. So this is known as the synaptic knob, right? It lies in very close proximity to the membrane of a dendrite. Okay, the synaptic knob. The cytoplasm of the synaptic knob contains many mitochondria. यहाँ पे आपको दो नजर आ रहे हैं. So if this is your synaptic knob, then this is the cytoplasm of the synaptic knob. And as you can see, it contains many mitochondria, which gives you an idea that synaptic transmission across neurons is an active process which requires ATP from cellular respiration. So the cytoplasm of the synaptic knob contains numerous mitochondria for energy. Not only this, but we can see many, many tiny such vesicles. Okay? These are synaptic vesicles, as you can see in the diagram. And each of this vesicle contains a chemical substance which is known as a neurotransmitter. Why do we need this chemical substance? Because I already told you that two neurons don't physically touch each other. So since they don't physically touch each other, there has to be some mechanism over here in which a chemical is released, and then that chemical energy of the substance is converted into electrical energy, and hence there will be a way by means of which this end of the neuron communicates with this end. See, this is one neuron, this is another neuron, a space in the middle. They can't touch each other. So the only way by means of which they can communicate is somehow if they are able to release this neurotransmitter substance which is contained in the synaptic vesicles into the space, क्योंकि जो छोटे छोटे molecules आपको इस vesicle में नजर आ रहे हैं ना, they will finally be released into the space. You can see all these molecules. These molecules will bring about a change in the polarization of the membrane over here, jiski wajah se now this chemical signal will be converted into an electrical signal. So we can say in a manner, this is a way by means of which this neuron communicates with this. They don't physically touch each other, but this neuron can release a chemical. As soon as the chemical reaches this cleft or this space, it will bring about changes in the membrane of this neuron, and these changes will be actually changes which will bring about the conversion of this chemical signal into an electrical impulse. So this is how they communicate each other. So we have lots of these synaptic vesicles which contain the neurotransmitter. Okay, and this neurotransmitter is responsible for the transmission of nerve impulses across the synapse. Okay, now the membrane of the synaptic knob. Let me just rub this so that you can see the membrane of the synaptic knob. ठीक है, आपको नजर आया अच्छी तरह से. This is the membrane of the synaptic knob. ये membrane, it's quite thickened. ठीक है, it's very thick. यहाँ पे इतनी साफ नजर नहीं आ रही, but it's actually very thick. and this membrane is known as the presynaptic membrane. Presynaptic इसलिए कि this is your synapse, ठीक है? On one end of the synapse we also have a membrane. On the other end of the synapse we also have a membrane. Okay, so since this membrane is prior to the synapse, so we give a name to it. इस membrane का एक नाम है, and that is your presynaptic membrane. If this is the pre, then this should be the post synaptic membrane. Right? So the membrane of the synaptic knob nearest the synapse is thickened, and it is called the presynaptic membrane. And the membrane which is over here, okay, this must be the dendrite of some other neuron, तो इसको हम membrane of the dendrite भी कह सकते हैं, या हम इसको post synaptic membrane भी कह सकते हैं. The membrane of the dendrite is also thickened, and it is known as the post synaptic membrane. The presynaptic membrane is modified. It is modified in such a manner so that it allows the attachment of these synaptic vesicles, right? See over here, this is your presynaptic membrane. It has been modified in such a manner that these synaptic vesicles can attach and they can release the neurotransmitter which is contained inside them, right? Okay, this is the modification of the presynaptic membrane. Similarly, the postsynaptic membrane is also modified. How? The postsynaptic membrane is modified to contain large protein molecules, and those are membrane protein molecules. Basically, they are found within the cell membrane of the postsynaptic membrane. Why are they modified? Because those protein molecules act as receptor sites to which these neurotransmitters can bind. जैसे कि यहाँ पे let me make some membrane receptors over here जो कि यहाँ होने चाहिए, right? Of course, no molecule in your body can just, freely move around. If a molecule is released, if a neurotransmitter is released over here, then this means there must be a mechanism for that neurotransmitter to bind to its specific receptor. And for that, the postsynaptic membrane has been modified, and it has been provided with large protein molecules which act as receptor sites so that the neurotransmitter substance can bind to it. Not only it has receptor sites, but it has many channel proteins. It has many channel proteins which are normally closed. Normally, जब तक कोई signal नहीं आता, those channel proteins are closed. Okay, and those channel proteins are actually meant for the movement of ions into the postsynaptic membranes. So your presynaptic membrane is modified so that the vesicles can attach to it, and then they can finally release the neurotransmitter by exocytosis. Whereas your postsynaptic membrane is modified in two ways. It has receptor sites which can attach to the specific neurotransmitter. हर neurotransmitter का अलग receptor है, and it has many channel proteins which are normally closed, but when they are open, they will allow the movement of ions into the postsynaptic neuron, right? So this is the brief outline of the anatomy of the synapse, and now we move on to how the synapse functions.